two, one.
G'day everyone, welcome to Walter's Tours, where we talk all things travel, adventure and touring. It is my pleasure, my honour to introduce someone who has crushed it in all these three categories, mate. You've done quite a lot in your career. So Grant, you're the founding member, lead guitarist and the key songwriter for the iconic rock band The Screaming Jets.
Yeah.
You've got a hit song, Better, which is certified classic. It's one of the most Australian mostly played songs in Triple M rock radio history, I believe.
Yeah.
The single has achieved sales exceeding gold status in 1991. It was nominated the highest selling single at the ARIA Awards. Your successes took you around the world, which is, I think you've toured with super rock bands like Ugly Kid Joe, Def Leppard, Alice Cooper, Kiss. I believe Motley Crue has been watching you from the side of stage. I think you've performed on a lot of TV shows or television networks like The Tonight Show, Channel V, MTV morning shows, Hey Hey It's Saturday. Mate, have I missed anything?
Yeah, that's like a snippet of it, really. Yeah, a lot more. A lot more bands, a lot more TV stuff. And you say, I've crushed it. It's almost crushed me many times.
Well, this is what I want to learn about. And this is thank you so much for coming down and be able to do this
it's a
podcast
pleasure,
because what I'm really interested to know is your lifestyle on the road. When people look at it online or on Google or on TV, they're like, oh, that's going to be the best job on earth. And I'm sure it is some incredible memories and moments.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it has a lot of pitfalls at the same time.
It's not all that is perceived as at all. It's in fact the complete opposite most of the time. I mean, look, you know, I'm here today because I'm a proud Novocastrian, you know, and I lived away for a long time. I've lived in several countries. I've lived in many cities. I've lived in many homes. I've lived in a suitcase for a long time, and you know, I've got 3 kids, and I came back home. There's no other place I'd rather be after traveling. I don't need to go anywhere. It's all here. Right? You know, I go down to, you know, Poggos and Dixon Park, and you know, I'm always down at the ocean pools or Nobbies, and this comes from, and here's the thing too, you know, tourists drive around the East End of Newcastle, and the Walmsleys are actually the family from the East End. We were the original, if you will, settling family of
your family history was one of the first ones in Newcastle.
Yeah, so the East End used to be called the Sandhills.
Yep.
In the 1800s, and my family owned at least one pub there that I know of, at least one. And you're talking late 1800s, early 1900s, and if you look at the honour boards at things like Newcastle Surf Club or anything up in town, there's Walmsleys all over it. And you know, my cousin Pete was the pool inspector at the Ocean Pool for a long time, and I've always had this affinity to the East End, and I was in, you know, the Little Nippers and East End board riders, and it's funny, like when I was about 17, you know, life was surfing, and you know, my big brother DJ and I, and my cousin Chad, you know, I'd surf Flat Rock and Carry Hole every day, or Newey Point, or you know, Nobby's, the Spot and the Reef and the Wedge and all these places that were just, we knew they were monumentally gold, and it's funny, like it's funny to see the town change a lot too, you know. You know, I come from, my 2 grandfathers worked at the BHP their whole career.
Jeez, you are Newcastle through and through. You've got connections with the BHP, you've got connections with the surfing culture.
Yeah, and you know,
Is it these reasons why you're still here?
Yeah, well, you know, my great grandfather was the local member for Labor in the 40s. I think it was the 40s, and he died quite young at 42 as the sitting member. And you know, his name's on the gates of Gregson Park, and he's got a street in Hamilton named after him. And so yeah, I'm just so Newcastle. It's not funny, and it's funny. I'm 50 years old now, and
what?
Yeah, I'm 50 years old, and I, you know, I got a couple of years.
You're looking good for 50.
Oh well, thanks. I try and I get in the water nearly every day, and my younger son he surfs, and so I'm in the water with him all the time, and that keeps me going. And it's really funny, you know, you start the day in Newcastle, go on the beach, and it doesn't matter what the day brings. You've just been in one of the best places in the whole world.
It's so accessible, isn't it? Like when you're in Newcastle, like for those who don't know Newcastle, the CBD, it's actually poorly located. It's located on a peninsula. They've got other major cities.
Yeah.
It might be inland a bit on the river. They've got Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane. It's all situated in. Newcastle's not. So you can be downtown or the CBD area and just go straight to the beach. It's really blessed.
Yeah.
Like you don't really discover that or appreciate it until you've been abroad and you can really see other cities.
Well, you know, a lot of, I've been doing this for 36 years now.
Doing
like touring and playing, and I I vividly remember, I not only started touring with a lot of people that I just completely admired, famous bands, but they become friends. And when you
who is it that you admired?
Well, you know, we grew up watching. It's funny, like coming from the East End. Here's the thing with music: the guys that I surfed with were into. And there was nothing wrong with this. They were into Bob Dylan, Neil Young, the Sex Pistols, and the Dead Kennedys. And there was nothing wrong with that. That was quite normal. And to me, I look at all those guys, and they're all got this sort of punk rock seam to them. And I'm not clinging on the word punk rock, but rock in Australia, like, you know, they talk about pub rock. And so the bands that we looked up to, I missed a lot of them. I was too young to see them, but I saw them the second time around, and then we started touring with them. So, you know, from your Barnsies to the Oils to the to In Excess to the Angels, you could just keep going. You know, they all came to Newcastle, and what I was going to say was when I actually got to know them and started touring with these guys, more than not, they would often drive down from Sydney at night, do the gig, and drive back to Sydney, and they never saw Newcastle. Or when the airport was established later on down the track, they'd fly to Newcastle. They'd drive across the Stockton Bridge and just see all this industry. And
sure.
And I mean, even back then, like, you know, the BHP and that. And I vividly remember people that didn't know Newcastle.
It's a terrible way to, if your first impressions come
That's
from Newcastle,
their first impression.
and you turn up from the airport, you think, what is this
And
place?
so they'd say, oh, look, I just want to get in and out of here. It's just horrible. Yep. And it's funny, like you say, where the CBD is situated and the whole bit. You know, I used to take a lot of pride in educating them. Like, you know what, where you are, if you're going to stay the night, just go down here and just go for a drive 2 or 3 Ks along the coast, and you'll see what everyone should have as a first impression of Newcastle. And maybe it's a good thing that they don't, because even more people would flock here. But I mean, for tourism, it's great that people flock here.
I'm glad you said that, because my actual slogan for Walters Tours is discovering Australia's best kept secret.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same experience you get when you're coming up from the motorway from Sydney.
Yeah.
If you get off through the Walls End exit, you go through some older, more rustic parts of Newcastle, which, I mean, it's charming in its own way, but it's not the highlights. I tell everyone,
take the Doyleson
and go up the Swansea way,
and go Swansea, and you'll see, you know, the largest saltwater lake in the Southern Hemisphere, which is absolutely gobsmacking, and then a coastline that's just indescribably beautiful. And for surfers, you know, and I often say this, you know, it's funny. I go down the beach, and the people I know on the beach, from the beach inspectors to everyone, I went to school with them. You know, it's like they're all lifelong friends, and it's great to grow my kids up in that environment too, because I've got 2 boys, and they're engrossed in that culture, and it's like a network and a family that they're always going to be safe in it. But we always talk about that from a surfing perspective. You know, from Merriweather to Bar Beach is one of the most consistent, great surf stretches of coastline in the state. No problem. You know, it's from a surfing perspective, it's hard to come here and not get a wave somewhere. You know, and from that perspective too, like, you know, if it was blowing northeast, we'd always drive to Brooby Point. And if it was blowing southerly, we'd go to 1 Mile, or we'd go to Nobbies, or the Spit, or the Wedge at Nobbies.
So were you surfing when you were growing up?
Or is this
always. Did you? So can actually we'll get onto that, because but I'd really like to know is how you got into surfing, or how you was able to do that around the rock career that you have?
Well,
like,
I kind of.
how did it all start? Like, were you surfing and playing music at the same time?
I had two passions. I had a bedroom. I shared a bedroom, the size of this small room we're in here with my brother for all of my childhood, and it was amazing. And we might have had one fight in our lives, and he's a year older than me, and our bedroom was covered in surf posters, and we're in the little nippers at Nobby's, so from young kids, and I mean, this is Newcastle. It gets my cousin Chad Watson. He's the editor of the Herald, and he's the same age as me also. So the three of us grew up like brothers, and his dad was a beach inspector and like an Olympic swim coach. So we grew up on Nobby's learning about surfing and was swimming. We're doing swimming laps and doing all that sort of stuff. And we used to go after school. We go up to Nobby's to train for nippers, and we just do Ironman for 2 hours straight. It was good fitness, but we weren't allowed to start training until we did our homework. And we did our homework in Warren Smith's first aid room at Nobby's. So I've known Warren since I was a little kid, and then later on I worked at his surf shop Trade Winds, and it was. I look back at that, and
How old were you when you were on the stage?
I started playing like in about year 7, so I was about 13. I went to school with Dave Gleason and Frank Manita, who was our drummer, and he's still my best mate. I still walk with Frank every day. So we were playing music from the time we hit high school at Morris Brothers Hamilton, and by year 9, 10, well we were always playing like school masses and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we jam in the school chapel, and we became a real band. We found a bass player finally, and we started doing. Our first gig was one of the school dances at our school at the town hall. So, but the thing that got me into that was my dad. He was playing guitar, and I used to sit on the bed with him when he got home from work every day, and he'd play for an hour or two every day and sing. And I'd just sit on the bed and I knew all the old songs, I knew all the songs he played, and I just wanted to play guitar too. And his guitar teacher, this is as incestuous as Newcastle is. It's incredible.
It's like 1 degree of separation.
Yeah, totally. Like so the most iconic band to me as a child and as a kid growing up in my teens was DV8. That was. I was allowed to go and see Greg Bryce play, who's one of my dearest friends and family to me. He was about 15 years older than me, but I was allowed to go and see him play in places like the Jolly Roger and all this, like incredible places.
Yeah.
But as about a 15 or 16-year-old, I was allowed to go if Greg picked me up and took me home. And so he was teaching my dad to play, and his mother and my dad worked together for many years, and they were very good golfers, so they played golf all the time. So I grew up in that. They were friends of the family, but very, very close. It was like family, So and Greg surfed as well, and I guess back in the day, I'm talking like watching 70s surf movies and early 80s surf movies. My job with my brother and cousin would be to put flyers on all the car windscreens around all the beaches and all the car parks for surf movies that actually used to be held at there was a theatre in the Junction which went down in the earthquake.
Yeah, okay.
No, I actually got knocked down and they built a place and that went down in the earthquake. But I don't know, people out there might remember the theatre in the Junction where the grill is. That was a theatre, and that's where surf movies were on. And so I just sort of, I don't know, and those surf movies had all the great Aussie bands, things like Richard Clapton, Australian Crawl, like they were the soundtracks to a lot of these movies.
Is that right?
Moving Pictures, yeah. And then we started playing all these guys, not that long after that.
So it's kind of like your music was also, could have been, or those styles of music was the first initial soundtracks you could get for surfing.
Well, absolutely, and I said before, like the surfers I grew up with, I use the term punk, not in the sense of hey, this is Green Day. Punk is, it's an attitude and it's a
anti-establishment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you looked at early Oils and early Angels and early In Excess, and I could probably go on, you would see a lot of that punk spirit that was just blazing trails, bloody-minded, single-minded, headspace. And so when we started playing in a band, it was like, and because we're mates and we're friends, it was like nothing will come between any of us. And anyone that knows, so that school band became the Jets, and anyone that knew us in about that first probably almost 10 years would know that there is no way you could have come between us or said a word about us or against us, or you would have had a whole army just fight. You just wouldn't go near it. And I think
that's where the Newcastle gets a reputation from.
well, it was like, I mean, look at me, I'm a little guy, and I'd like to think I'm a peacemaking hippie, so I never been in a fight in my life. But that spirit of, you can't tell us we won't get anywhere, and it wasn't written about it, but the words embedded was, it said you never get anywhere. I heard that so many times as a young guy in a band from people in Newcastle, bands in Newcastle, because no one had really ever broken out of Newcastle ever. And Deviate were a massive band in Newcastle, man, just incredible. People don't understand how big they were, and all original songs that Greg wrote. So I really, I wanted to be a songwriter.
It sounded like it really inspired and thought, I can do this.
He was, Greg was great. Greg was also in a world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and he was completely the opposite. And he taught me at an early age, that's always going to be there. But just, and he was a really good role model. And another good role model of mine was Mark Tinson. And I had lunch with Tino yesterday. And he was in a band called The Heroes, and they were a little bit before me. I never got to see them until they reformed, and then we were supporting them, But they were the famous Newcastle band that made it. They were on Countdown. They did national tours. They did AC/DC's Back in Black tour, I believe, And I met, and at a young age, I think it was Greg said, you got to meet Tino. And I think I met Tino maybe 15 years of age. And the amount of things that he taught me were just incredible. And he's a teetotaler.
Oh, what is it?
A teetotaler. So no drugs, no alcohol.
Okay.
Never.
Yep. In this
crazy world of rock and roll. So I had that, but then I also had, you got to understand, the East End back then was pretty loose, It was, we had friends die of heroin overdoses and all sorts of stuff up there. It was a sort of a cross between. There's two movies that I sort of in the surfing culture that I relate to so heavily. It's frightening. One is Puberty Blues and one is Big Wednesday, and it's about that surf culture. And the surf culture back then was very localized, and literally, if you paddled out in the wrong break, you'd risk getting a punch in the face.
Territorial.
You'd be told to get out of the water, and if you didn't, the guys would come to school with black eyes.
Yeah.
So the funny thing with me, with my brother and I and my cousin Chad, was we were always respected just from name. So we sort of we didn't have to deal with that, and so we had the older guys. I remember older guys teaching me how to jump off the rocks and where to jump off the rocks as a kid surfing, and it's funny because I see all those boys now. We've all got kids, and I see them with their sons as I do, and often I'll walk around at low tide around Newcastle Point or Carrier Hole, Flat Rock, and take my youngest son Zim and go, look, this is what this looks like at low tide, so that you can find out where all the rocks are. You can see that it's not that frightening when you know where all the bodies are buried, And if you jump off here, this is where you end up. And there's nothing dangerous about this, And that's a beautiful thing, 40 years later, seeing my mates passing that on to their kids and me passing that on to my kid. And the irony and the funny thing is, if you go to like Poggos, I don't know if you know Poggos. Poggos, okay. Well, here's a little
You're given a very interesting perspective on where Newcastle once was at, and where it's at now. Because if you go to Newcastle now, you look over the water, you wouldn't make any. You wouldn't have that filter. You wouldn't have that knowledge of that history background.
No,
to be able to determine that. So it's quite interesting to learn about it.
I draw a parallel. Like I got asked a few years ago to be a leading ambassador for Newcastle music, trying to say venues and all that sort of stuff, which I absolutely do. And when it happened by default. And though I think the catalyst was they were going to knock the Cambridge down or something like that, and the Lassigari had problems and the Wicklow had problems, and everyone came to me, and I'm like, "What are you coming to me for?" And then
when did this happen? When did they come to you?
This was about 2 years ago, and And then they asked me
Yep.
to speak at parliamentary inquiries and all this sort of stuff.
Why'd they want to knock it down?
Developments, developments and erasing culture and places to play and perform music. And
It's funny, recapping on that culture.
Yeah.
Like if you go onto Wikipedia and type in Newcastle,
yeah,
it goes, it's known for surfing, it's known for great sporting,
Yeah,
supportive,
absolutely.
and hard rock
Yeah.
punk music. This
Yeah.
is what you're talking about.
Okay, so when they came to me, I sat back and went, I think I'm the only one that can be this person to speak. Not the only one, but I can offer a perspective that is so Newcastle. It's not funny. I mean, my great uncle was the double bass player in the Palais band from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then I started playing the Palais in the 90s. And, of course, the Palais got knocked down and became the largest KFC in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
So I can just bang on about this because it's like,
Yeah.
what are we doing, right? So there was that side. And then I was going to say the irony of if I go to Nobby's or Newcastle Carryhole or swim at Ocean Pool, quite often you'll be at the beach and you'll hear all these other languages and people that they're traveling and they're touring like as just a gap year or something, and this came hand in hand with being like top 10 of the Lonely Planet destinations.
2011.
Yeah,
2011
okay. So I see that, and it's actually a really fantastic thing. And I've had some great conversations with people in Europe, and I don't tell them too much about the history, but maybe through this they'll understand a bit more of the history. And so yeah, I've sort of always walked this line between the surf beach culture and music culture. And I got to say,
something that you would. I mean, when I was doing my research on you, I didn't like. There's so many things on Google and YouTube and Wikipedia about yourself, but it's really interesting to learn about.
None of it's true online.
Actually, I got some gems on here that's what I'd really love to ask you about. But yeah, it's really interesting to learn about how Newcastle really was culturally. I mean, where it's at now, like Newcastle nowadays, it's pushing forward.
Yeah.
It's gone through a million or billions of dollars of redevelopment and revitalizing because was that always a good thing, having a hard rock punk band? Is it a good thing culturally to go surfing and it's a real, like, the locals rule, get off my wave? It's sort of like a scene out of Point Break, which might scare the shit out of people. But
and it was like that.
Yeah, that's. But is that worth holding on to at the same time?
Look, there's negatives and positives in anything, right?
Yeah.
And the positives was you had to earn respect in the ocean. You had to earn it.
Is this where the energy fueled to go what you've achieved in the Screaming Jets?
To
have that attitude.
Well, here's a funny thing. One of the elephants in the room back in that time, and I don't think it exists anymore, but it was very big tall poppy syndrome in Newcastle and Australia, I think.
Australia, New Zealand, I can bang on about that. It's something that I love about Australia.
Yeah.
But there's pitfalls. Nothing's perfect, and that is one of the pitfalls that we have in Australian culture is the tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
I mean, you've achieved success. They'll be like, oh, you can't make it as a band.
We had to move to Sydney
to get out of that.
We literally packed a car. I still remember the day packing this old car that our manager owned. We didn't even own a car.
So is that what inspired you to leave Newcastle?
We moved to Sydney in this squalor for a long time.
Was it smaller than this?
We had to leave. It was smaller than this, and there was 7 of us live in it.
Yep.
And I used to have this space on the floor with Dave. We had mattresses, and it was so small. Dave and I'd often wake up looking at it to go, God. It was that small. And and we were playing all the gigs in the King's Cross area at the time, and this was when the Golden Mile was happening. And
actually,
it was a pretty crazy time.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because this, and I'll read this out because this is on Wikipedia. Maybe I edited this on Wikipedia.
Yep.
But this is what it says. Because when you left Newcastle, when you went to Sydney, and you were just starting to grow as a band, through the 1990s, Screaming Jets become infamous for a series of raucous, sometimes violent shows. During the show, during an EP launch, a fight broke out between the band's faithful Newcastle fans mixed with the Sydney fans, I think it was at a cafe in the red light district. Did this happen?
There's probably if it was probably Cardoma Cafe, which was
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, which is where every band played. I mean,
Yep.
Mick Jagger played there after one of his gigs. Like people that do secret gigs there. I remember doing gigs there with Skid Row on the side of the stage, just going, man, you guys are the greatest band I've ever seen, you know. and Sebastian Bach just going, hey, you guys are insane, you know, like that would be some truths in that because at the time you got to see, you know, King's Cross was you got to a lot of them were our mates too, and they'd come down to Sydney to watch us and support us and really get behind us. And there were days when people from all over Western Sydney would come into King's Cross, and you know, in those days it was like a lot of people wanted to go out just to drink rum and fight.
Yeah.
And you put these groups together.
The glory days of Australia.
It's a horrible thing, but you often went to big concerts in those days, and they talk about the pub rock, and often gigs would be stopped by bands and let's stop fighting. We were a much more peaceful race, I think, in the industry now. But you know, look.
So that's how you really started it. Like, what age were you? So when you moved to Sydney, where were you in your career? How old were you? Where were the Screaming Jets?
I was probably 19 or 20. Yeah. We'd been going here for a year. We were our band was Aspect before that for about 5 years. So it was. Paul joined that, so and Dave and I were always in that with Frank, and then we got Brad Heaney to play drums, and we got Richie Lara to play guitar, and we went 5-piece, and we changed our name, and we were just going, we're not going to stop, we're going all the way, and so we spent about a year here developing the band, and when I say developing the band, those first 5 years of our band, you know, when Better comes out and we're selling out festival halls and Hordern pavilions.
Is that right? So you wrote Better?
Yeah, I wrote Better, and I wrote Better like quite a few years before it came out too. And we had a lot of songs. I wrote a lot of songs. Paul wrote a lot of songs. We wrote a lot of songs together. So there's always a lot of songs. But people don't understand that, you know, when you spend a year or 5 years developing a band back then, that meant about 600 or 700 gigs that you did. Now that's unheard of now. Unheard of. You know, I've done about 3,500 gigs.
What would you gain out of that development? So you get feedback from the crowd?
Well, this is how it was in Newcastle. And going back to like your INXS's, your Cultures, or your AC/DCs, you just look, any band you could mention, they would say, and Don Walker would eloquently state this from Cold Chisel, you went to Newcastle and it was the working class best rock town, one of the best rock towns in the world. But if you sucked, be prepared to have stuff thrown at you, right? Yeah. And this is a true story. We used to do a residency. Someone brought this to Frankie, my old drummer and my best mate, brought this to my attention the other day. Dave actually said not that long ago, I believe, and I've heard this secondhand from Frank, but we had this residency at the Cambridge Hotel every Friday night for years. And I was actually underage then, for sure. There's no doubt about it. And
what an incredible school!
It was
training
regime.
So talking about development.
That was, you know, from like 15 or 16, we had residencies, and this was the thing with Saving Newcastle Music. We played the Marcus O'Lawn, which is called the Mark in Lambton, every Wednesday. Totally underage. I mean, the publican nearly fell over when I had my 18th birthday there. Are you kidding
Surprise.
me? You've been here for years. I didn't drink, though. I want to be a professional musician,
sure.
You know.
Yep.
And when I got my license, I was the guy that drove everywhere, and you know I was the driver. So, but we played there every Wednesday. We played the Cambridge probably might have been Saturday night residency. I can't remember, but it was every week. We played what's West Mayfield now, which used to be called Shoemakers Club, every second Friday. And we had all these other residencies. So we were literally playing 4, 5, 6 nights every week. And certainly by the time we'd finished high school, we'd been doing that already for quite a long time.
Yeah.
The horrible thing is we were sort of making the same money then as bands are making now. In fact, more money That's how bad the industry has been considered, I guess, from an economic, artistic viability perspective by government, society, whatever. We don't value culture, and we don't value artists and the cultural aspects like we should. We don't. We just
how
don't.
we consume music and purchase music would have certainly
well,
evolved.
Well, I'll get onto that in a sec. I mean, but your question was, how does that help you develop yada yada? Here's a real snapshot. We'd play this gig at Tube Makers, and it was a gig we'd do, and it was Mayfield then. People don't understand. It was a pretty wild place, and Dave and Frank and I knew everyone from Mayfield because we went to Morris Brothers. So when you went to Morris Brothers, you got people from every suburb in Newcastle. So I had so many mates from Mayfield, and you knew the guys they're pretty tough, and they were tough guys. The Shortland boys were tough guys. The Stockton guys were just mad surfers, and they were great guys, and they could surf. So every and then we'd have the Bar Beach and the Merriweather doctors and lawyers kids, and they were all in the same school. So it was pretty funny. It was pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
But we played this gig at Tube Makers in Mayfield, and we'd always say, just keep your eyes open while you're playing. And people would go, why would you do that? Because it was a big auditorium, big stage, and often if a song wasn't going down or the band wasn't going down, you would hear a schooner glass smash on the back wall of the stage that was thrown from the crowd. And that's how tough it was. And so if you talked to Peter Garrer or anyone, they'd say Newcastle was so brutal. If you didn't earn your respect as a band, you would just be wiped from the face of the earth. There's no doubt about it. So you had to be tough.
How do you earn the respect of a hard pub rock crowd?
Well, if anyone looks at, and I hate that kids don't know this. I hate it, and it should be taught in school. If kids saw what Midnight Oil were about in their first 5 years, it was brutal. The politics, the raw energy.
Sorry, do you like cats?
I love cats. I don't.
Got a accidental resident mascot.
Even guys like In Excess who weren't political. If you look at them in their early days, they were a tough band.
But when you say tough, like they earn their stripes to please that hard pub rock crowd.
I think they worked.
How do you do that?
Well, people talk about pub rock, right? And pub rock is you had to be good. You had to have good songs. You had to road test songs. You had to know how to work an energy of a crowd. And most importantly, you had to leave nothing left in the tank. You had to walk off stage and just collapse because that was expected of you. And that always reminded me, there was a really famous Stevie Ray Vaughan quote. And he came from Austin, Texas, and we used to tour Texas a lot. And Texas was the same. It's like Newcastle. Like, you better be hard and good.
Yeah.
We don't have no pussies in Texas. It was like that here. And he once said, when you're a performer and you get on stage, you can't expect a thing from an audience at all, nothing at all. But they expect everything from you. And that's how we were raised in music.
I guess with that pressure of that expectation from a very from that, I wouldn't say a brutal, maybe it is a brutal crowd.
Yeah.
You had to rise up. You had to step up. You had to deliver. It made you go next level.
Man,
versus having a tamer crowd where you could put in your heart and soul and they're not as engaged. But
man, we got I'll do a little quick snapshot. So it's always funny, we had to leave Newcastle or just be. So
what was the transition from if you? Yeah. You talked about, I think you explained it quite well. It's really interesting. This cat's incredible. It's really interesting to know, like what you experienced in Newcastle, and then you pop down the road. You're in Sydney. How is that different? Because we were treated, Sydney took you to the Australian the world.
We were treated like country cousins that were second rate by every band we played with. We supported a lot of bands, and most of them treated us really poorly. Just a bunch of bogans from Newcastle. Literally,
still
right?
happens. So, still a reputation today.
And see, Sydney back then was the Surrey Hills bands were Surrey Hills, but you knew Surrey Hills bands. I knew every one of them, and I wanted to be them because they were on the front covers of all the street press.
Sure.
And that was our goal. We'd get all the Sydney street press. We want to do that. It's a good mate of mine that plays with me a lot, Steve Mack, and he's been around, and he coined the term novo castrated. And
For
what,
those who are listening, if you're from Newcastle, you called it Novocastrian.
that's right. Yeah.
So you got to be local to basically say that. But what is it?
So
Nova.
he eloquently termed this phrase that described bands that, you know, we're all talk, we're going to be famous, we're going to do this, but they never cross the Swansea Bridge. They're never castrated, and they don't get hungry for it. They don't fight for it. They don't work for it. And see, we always knew. And again, I'm getting back to the heroes in DV8. So one thing I learned off Mark Tinston and Greg was, and they always told us this, man, if you want to make it, get out of here. Go. You have to go. You had to go to Sydney or Melbourne in those days. You absolutely had to. There's no doubt. So we went down there, and the pivotal, the luck and timing always come into play with any success. Always, right? And the luck and timing for us was the manager we had at the time entered us into what sort of became Triple J Unearthed. And we won the Sydney leg of that, and then the state leg of that. And that was all live playing and songs. And then we were in the national thing, and we won it. The Australian Triple J, you know.
So that was the break.
It was the first time they'd done a band thing since like Double J or whatever. And
yeah.
So what happened now was we're doing the Cardoma Cafe. That was a very definitive venue for us. We did a Monday night residency there in King's Cross, and you'd often take your sunglasses there because you'd leave at 6 or 7 in the morning, and we lived down the road, so you wouldn't make the mistake of not taking your sunnies to the gig, right? And that was
really
when,
is living
when you lived like a vampire. I mean, you slept all day, and you got up about 8 o'clock at night.
So when for those who haven't lived your lifestyle,
you don't want to.
But this is really interesting to know, like, because I recently watched on Netflix. I think it's Dirt.
Yeah, sure.
Follows the lifestyle. Is there references similar to that of Dirt that you've lived?
100%. 100%. Everything I've seen on that, I've seen. 100%. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it was a wild time. If you're in rock and roll, you were going hard.
So it really is
slog.
sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
It was.
So when you were starting to come up and you won, what was next? What happened to the Screaming Jets?
So what happened was we were doing Monday night residencies, and we were talking to music publishers and record companies and big managers in Sydney, and they're like, who cares? But when we won that, bang, we'd play Monday night at the Cardoma Cafe, and Michael Gudinski would be standing next to Chris Murphy, who would be standing next to this guy. There might be 10 guys in the venue, and they're all like the heads of massive record companies or massive managers.
Like your artist and repertoire.
Absolutely.
People.
And they all wanted us. And we created this thing that is called a bidding war between record companies and music publishers, and they all wanted to sign us. So we let them all take us out for dinner because we had no money.
That's a good problem to have.
So they'd pay for dinner. And I remember them taking us, we're going to see Alice Cooper, and we've got him in town, and come meet him. And we got that all the way through. And so, but what happened with us was we wanted to be the biggest band in the world. And so we signed with this guy called Chris Murphy, not the lawyer Chris Murphy, Chris Murphy, CM Murphy, who, if you've seen any Excess movies or whatever, Chris was their manager. And he's a guy from Wollongong, and he was very much like us. He was just a, surfer dude that
Wollongong similar to
moved to the big smoke,
Newcastle.
right?
Yep.
And he took on this band called In Excess, and he believed in them. And we signed with him because they were the second biggest band in the world when we signed with them. They were second to U2. Factually, In Excess were that big.
Yeah.
I remember spending a lot of time in New York and London with Chris, and his New York office. I never forget this. He had this massive poster the size of this wall, and it was In Excess, Kick, special guest Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses were supporting In Excess,
and it was a small support. That's how big they were, right?
Yeah.
So we signed with them, and his kudos was, and this is coming back to what made bands tough. In Excess made it internationally huge because they spent about 10 years touring the States. And that's hard yards. It's hard yards. You live on a bus.
What is it? What's the key differences between touring Australia and touring the States?
Well, if you want to break the States, you have to be in the States. They they don't take kindly to a band that blows in and goes, oh, yeah, we just did a month tour, we're going back home. When we would say that to our record companies and our people in the States, would go, what do you mean you're leaving? Where are you going? There's 1,000 other bands right behind you. If you leave, they'll just take your spot. So those bands had the balls and the tenacity and the toughness as a unit. We're going to war. They were like on a 10-year tour of duty. And the Oils did it too. And the Angels did it. And AC/DC absolutely did it. They did in Europe.
The key way of promoting was to turn up to the town.
You had to tour.
Yep.
You had to tour because why would a radio station play a song if you're not doing a gig there?
Makes sense.
And that's what it was all about. And kids today wouldn't understand that. You had to go to every town and build relationships. It's about building relationships. And I think things are so fickle and so disposable now because no one builds relationships.
It's built, but built differently.
They do. Yeah, they do. They do. And bands earn respect because bands give their fans what the fans want and they interact with their fans. And those bands that do that, whether it's Taylor Swift or Katy Perry or, bands like City and Colour or, complete other end of the spectrum, they create their tribe. And they can do it differently now. But back then you had to actually go to the town and do it.
Well, they didn't have phones. You didn't have Facebook or Instagram.
There was nothing then. This is before MySpace. This is before websites.
Yep.
There was no websites then. I remember our first website was like 93
I guess you had TV, radio, and turn up and
well,
play.
we used to do like MTV all around the world. We'd always do MTV. And if you went on MTV, you just wouldn't have a crack at it, And that MTV thing was if they didn't break you, you didn't break. And we had a few good shots at that. We had airplay on MTV. And look, for many reasons, it's very difficult to break internationally. But we had a real go, and we had some good successes internationally. Crowded House were another band, and Grant Thomas, who managed them, he ended up managing us after a period. And I remember talking to him at a backyard barbecue in LA in the Valleys at a friend of mine's house, and we were looking for a new manager, and Grant was over there at the Crowded House, and he said, "Yeah, man, I'll take us on. That's cool. He was a Kiwi, but he understood the work ethic and the tenacity that was involved, and Crowded House also toured relentlessly. Neil wanted to break the States, and Woodface was a pretty big record for them, but I think it was the one before it was the biggest one, and they could never hold on to that success. But people at New Crowded House over there, they're still big fans. But when you look at the bands that should have popped internationally and didn't or couldn't, that's where that luck and timing thing comes in. And we kind of knew that, but you had to be there. But we talk about touring and the lifestyle. The lifestyle of that, it just ruins you. It just wipes you out.
How do you keep the momentum going? So you really built yourself up from Newcastle in that hard pub rocking atmosphere. So you really made you go next level as far as a performer. You went to Sydney with that energy, with that, right, if we can experience and endure that, bring it on. So you were able to achieve that in Sydney and then able to go around Australia. Was that the next level?
Well, here's the thing. So when we won this Triple J thing and everyone wanted us, the Angels manager at the time, John Woodruff, who is absolutely one of probably Australia's top 5 managers of all time. He managed the Baby Animals. He managed Savage Garden, who had massive success. They sold like 20 million records or something. He was behind all that. And we're having a piss in the Dunnies at the Cardama one day, and John looked at me and goes, man, you know what I regret? I regret not signing you guys. He passed on us, and he regretted it. And rightly or wrongly, it was just the way it was. But he gave us a National Angels tour, and the Angels were... People have no fucking idea how big that band was and how good that band was. Doc Neeson was like Peter. Him and Peter Garrett and Michael Hutchence were just fucking out of this world. They were the most dynamic front man. The bands were amazing. The songs were amazing. Now, we went to our first national tour with them, and believe me, if you went on a tour opening for the Angels in those days, people would say no to the opportunity because of how fearful they were of the audience, because they would get fucking torn to shreds.
Jeez.
And so we had to step it up, and we won them over. And
how did you win them? How did you win that intensive crowd?
It was like Australians are good at, back then people were good at testing your mettle to see what you got. Let's have it. And people still take the piss and we'll see what you got. don't be too sensitive.
Mm.
Or we'll just keep going. We'll see how you cop it.
Yeah.
And so we gave it back, and they turned. And so by the time we put our first album out, better than that, we'd done national tour. We'd turned a lot of people onto us. But we'd also watched bands that came before us, like Johnny Diesel and the Injectors and Noiseworks, do tours with the Angels. And you had to deliver, or you'd be ripped to shreds. There's no denying that. So I guess all that, the 6 years behind us being strong and doing all those gigs, it enabled us to we could actually perform. We could actually deliver. We could actually play. We were good players, and we could just turn it up to, all the way and just annihilate people with energy.
So what I'm really interested to know, because I've done a lot of travel myself, but very differently. I haven't done it performing on a stage with a guitar. I perform like 50 people with a microphone, being a tour guide. But I got to prepare. If I don't prepare, as you say, like the expectation of a traveller, of a guest I'm touring around with, rip me to shreds with a review on TripAdvisor or something like that. So the expectation is very different, but I still have to step up. But it is bloody challenging to do that day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. How do you, how do you, because you talk about how wild it is and the expectations and how do you step up? You might have 3 hours sleep, or you're this far away from Dave Gleason.
Yeah.
How do you go, all right, I'm 2 hours sleep?
Well, look, there's a few.
How do you prepare
there's
to
a
go
yin
on
and
tour?
yang with this is everything.
Yeah.
I give you Neil Finn so eloquently put once. He said, if you don't live together, play together, rehearse together, drink together, do gigs together, you're actually not in a band. Our band lived together. We lived on tour buses. We lived in small units all around the world. How do we cope with that? This is the other side of that. And there's a Netflix, it's on Foxtel. There's a show on drugs and bands, and I just watched it recently, and I was blown away. Like things
What's
like
it called? Do you
I can't remember what it's
called.
called. I just can't remember what it's called. But
Yeah,
but it's amazing, and it talks about Motley Crue and Tom Petty, and I didn't realize that even through it talks about Prince, Michael Jackson, all these sorts of things. These guys were so burnt out that they were on so much medication, and before that they would have been self-medicated. And
well, it's an unnatural act for a human being to be continuously on the road touring.
So
by nature or by design, we're also meant to be sort of fixed in one location for extended periods.
You finish a gig in Tucson, Arizona, and you drive all night, and you drive maybe 10 hours, and your next gig's in New Mexico, and you haven't slept, you haven't showered, you haven't seen a bed,
and you've got that expectation
and
you need to deliver.
Stage. And when you look at bands, I don't get too into the drugs and alcohol side of things, but when you look at, you've got to now perform, you can see why all those bands went through that. You look at the Motley Crue, Dirt, and it was either boredom, or your body's just going to fail you, or you needed to just numb your brain so that the chaos of living and smelling sweaty clothes and that all the time was just too much to bear. You certainly couldn't do that in your older years, and certainly for us when we started having kids and families, it was just very difficult to go back to that.
Yeah, that's what I'm very curious to know. Like, how do you manage that? So, how many years on the road before you? So you got a family and some children. Prior to that, I mean, if you got no kids, it's a lot easier. If you don't have a cat, goldfish to look after.
No, I had nothing.
It's a lot easier. So I guess in the early stages, when you're in your 20s, your body can be more resilient. You can bounce back. But as time progresses and just on the road, as you're saying, it wears down. But how do you manage that? How do you?
For me, I didn't have. I had my first job, Molly, I was 25. So I'd done about 10 years living in a suitcase. Pretty much. I mean, at least 6 years, 100% a suitcase. I didn't have a home. I never had a home. I would never put down roots because I'd have to go away again indefinitely. But my partner at the time, my oldest kid's mum, she was amazing. She really had faith in me. She really believed in me. She actually moved around the world with me to support me. And the ways I used to cope was she was a very big strength to me, but I also used to take advice from people that had done a lot of touring, and the best piece of advice I ever got was wake up and go for a walk and have a look at the city you're in. Travel around the city, see what it's got to offer.
Is that right? So
don't stay in a hotel room and do drugs and drink. You'll go mad. And a lot of bands did that instead. You know? So we actually did, as a band even, we'd make an attempt to get out.
I'm very interested about that. What is it? So, I don't know. Well, firstly, where have you toured to? Australia-wide and around the world. And then what would be some key places where you thought, you might have been really tired. As you said, you've been driving all night, you're on 1-2 hours sleep, and then you get to an incredible city. How does that revitalise you?
Oh, like, for instance, Dave and I were actually avid readers. We would read a lot. People wouldn't know. I'd go through a book because I don't get car sick, so I'd even read at night with a light on. I'd just read and read and read. So particularly in America, we used to love as a band, okay, we're going to Mississippi. So we'd read about the KKK and all this sort of stuff, like morbid stuff. And we'd get there and we'd go, wow, this is actually, and when we first got there, that stuff was still going on. We saw black people asked to leave restaurants and stuff. It was real.
When did this happen? That was
about 91. That I remember. I remember the band just going there. Oh, did you see that? But things like, we'd have if we were on a big bus, we'd ask the driver, we're going to Dallas. Can you pull up? Well, what time do we expect to get into Dallas, Texas? Probably about 4:30 a.m. Okay, cool. Can you park out the front of Dealey Plaza so when we wake up, we'll wake up at Dealey Plaza in Dallas, and that's where JFK was shot. So we'd do things like that, and as morbid as it sounds, we'd find history in places. We'd go to the Alamo.
So you learn about the culture of each place.
Yeah. And it was about, like I would say to people in Newcastle, just get out and see what it's got to offer. And so that's good for your mind as well when you travel.
Big time.
Yeah.
I'm really big on this stuff. Hence why I do this.
And I could see our band, like any band, the mental health was not even spoken about in those days, by the way. Not even mentioned. It didn't exist. But you'd see the energy of the band and everyone's headspace when we were doing things together. Or
you might have poor diet.
100%.
Poor, like you're fatigued.
We just didn't eat.
So you was able to,
it was. Look at us, but then we were thin as rakes. It was.
Yet you're still able to find energy elsewhere, and travel was one of those. Or finding, I wouldn't say like sightseeing, or maybe it is sightseeing, or is it something like finding something unique about that town, culturally?
Yeah.
You get that. Wow. Oh shit, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's learn about this town. So you would use that potentially to revitalise yourself to perform at a gig.
100%. We'd meet people in each town, and you come back to towns and they become friends. And look, in rock and roll, I got to say, sometimes those friends aren't the most healthy people you want to hang around. But that's what it was like in bands. But some of these characters, I remember the most insane characters around the world, whether an island or Scandinavia or the States. That actually take you to things that you never would have seen. And sometimes in dangerous situations too, we're lucky we're all alive. The miles we've done and the things we've survived, it's pretty crazy.
Is there something that really stood out, like a crazy gig or something was like, holy shit, that just happened?
Yeah. Look, there's definitely been situations at gigs where you see guns.
What?
100%. I remember this time we're in.
Was this in the States, presumably?
Yeah, in the States. Oh, yeah.
And someone's just taking a gun to a gig.
Texas is. Oh well, actually, once in San Diego, there was a bit of a fight at one of our gigs, and after the gig, everyone was sort of ducking for cover because the guys ran to his car to get his gun out of his glove box and come back in. And so that actually happened. That stuff.
But was this post your gig? Like, were you still playing?
No, it's just after the gig. Yeah, it was just after the gig.
What do you do? What did you do in that moment?
We sort of just made an exit. Yeah.
Get the hell out of there.
But there was like, this is cool things. Like, you go to Texas and you make friends with these loose guys. They're loose as you can get. And we had this one guy and he goes, and we used to play this gig in San Antonio a bit. And we befriended these really radical cats. One guy was a biker. I can't remember his name, but he took me some crazy places. And anyway, we got this guy one night, and we're on stage, and he goes, "Look, I breathe fire." And he was like part American Indian. He was like this.
Was he a performer or is he just...
Well, I don't know. He said, let me do it. I'm really good at it, right? And so he gets on stage, and there's a big stage, and he goes, let me do it, right? I'm like, cool. He said, no, just
Yeah, was this guy planned or rehearsed? Or
No. This is just like...
just I can breathe fire.
We knew him, but he said, let me do this, right?
Okay.
So he said, just fucking stand back. I mean, this is big. And he breathed fire, and it went to like 10 meters more. and you could feel, it was like, fucking hell, this is a venue. and then after that, he's taken the guys back, and I bailed early. I sort of had a bit of a good radar to go, no, this is trouble. I'm not going there.
That's what we call strategically smoke bombing.
But the guys go down. He gets all his guns out, and I won't mention one of our guys. One of our guys picked up the gun, and he's going, whoa, man, that's loaded. Don't touch that.
So he's a responsible gun owner.
He's a responsible gun
Okay.
owner. He was a responsible loose.
He's not just any type of gun owner.
Yeah,
He slaps your hand down if you reach for it.
fire-breathing mad Texan. So I don't know. Anyway, and one of the funny things too with bands was, we went around Europe a lot as well. We were a little lucky, we went a lot of places.
Actually, I've researched about that because I think for a while there, because you've mentioned about touring Australia and also the States, but I think you moved to the UK for a couple of years.
Yeah, we lived between London and LA.
Talk about an intense travel schedule.
On rotation with Sydney
Yep.
for quite a while. Because
It's like when you look at it geographically,
Yeah.
it's like if you get a sphere being the Earth and you almost get like a triangle on the
Yeah,
opposite
for
ends. That was
sure.
LA,
Yeah.
London,
Yeah.
and Sydney.
Yeah, but that's what In Excess did, and we were following their model. And,
Sure.
and Chris was like, get back on
That's
the road.
what you do.
Get back
Yep.
on the road. Got another tour. And you get home from a tour and you go, I don't want to tour anymore. And you've got to go on tour again. And you kiss all your loved ones and go, I don't know when I'm going to see you again.
How long was the tour? How long was a tour or several? Because I'd imagine you'd be doing it to back
It was
possibly
endless.
new music.
Yeah, it was endless. It was like the first two
Yeah.
albums was endless. That 3 or 4 year cycle through that it didn't stop at all. And the downside of that, we had casualties on that. We lost a lot of people on the way.
When you say casualties, what do you mean?
Well, that drummer Brad, he just couldn't sustain it. We had to send him home from a European tour. He just couldn't
Fatigue.
couldn't cope anymore.
Yep.
And then Richie wasn't far behind him. He just couldn't cope anymore. We had to sack roadies, managers. We had to sack them because things weren't right. People around us in our circle died from all sorts of things. And people don't see the damage that's left on the side of the road when you travel so much in that situation,
I can certainly have a real appreciation for that. Being tour like I've when I first started tour guiding, I was a European tour leader, so I'd take coach tours around Europe.
Yeah.
Small tour go for 7 days, long one go up to 26.
Yeah.
And as soon as I'd be on the road, 1 or 2 days in London, boom, back on the road again.
Yeah.
18-hour days with a microphone. Anyone who's sort of done this job can relate. So I don't know what it's like to be performing, but I can appreciate.
We did a lot of those. Most of those tours on sleeper coaches, so they sleep about 12 people.
I've seen those.
So we'd live on a bus,
Yeah,
and at first you go, this is unreal. And I tell you what, a month into it, it's not so unreal. You're living with road crew, the band. There's no. We'd usually at a gig you'd find a shower, and sometimes we'd get one hotel room just so everyone could have a shower. That was pretty tough. But we would go. We'd base in London, and then we'd go. We'd start in Norway, and we'd work our way right through Scandinavia.
Who are you touring with? Or are you just by yourselves? Your headline?
Yeah, we did headline tours. We did Ugly Kid Joe. We played with a band called the London Choir Boys. They were a really big band. They just supported Rolling Stones on a world tour, and we did a great European tour with them. Actually, that was really cool. But the first time we did it, we sort of did it on our own. We headlined through the UK and through Europe, and some of the greatest stories. We flew to Belfast to do a gig at the Ulster Hall, which is a very famous venue in Belfast, and this is when Belfast was Belfast. And poor old Brad, our drummer, he used to like war memorabilia, and he found this, and he used to buy like replica guns and all that sort of stuff, and he bought this replica hand grenade, and this is 1991, and we're at Heathrow, and we're getting a flight to Belfast. and the alarms go off. This guy's got a grenade in his back. It's a true story. And I saw it. I'm like, oh, I'm walking the other way. And I just
who is this guy?
Guys, keep walking, right? And because it was so mad, it was like I can't even support this. I can't even be there for you, mate. Right?
Didn't he not think for one moment
this true story
that could be a problem?
so it gets better. So he finally, I mean, this is 91. Can you imagine that now? You just get shot in the head, right?
You could be on the front page of news, local nincompoop.
It was on a lot of news.
This
was on a lot of news. This was. So anyway, he goes, oh, look, I'm a World War II buff, and I found this replica, and they let him go. They took the grenade like a screwdriver and let him go. You know, it's like a can of Rexona in your bag. We better just take that nick and be on your way.
But was there a certificate of authenticity proving?
I think he had all that. Yeah. And he was serious about it. He loved that stuff. You know, And I must say, when we went through Germany and a lot of Europe, we used to love seeing all the World War II stuff. We loved seeing all that stuff.
Oh, but it's mind blowing when you dig deep in that.
We fly to Belfast, and this is mad, right? We're going to Belfast, and we're driving in this bus, and we're getting close to. We're going from the airport to Belfast City, and we get pulled over by a tank. A tank pulls us over, and there's this guy's about 18 pointing a machine gun at us from the top of the tank. And these guys get out, and they got guns, and they wanted to suss us out. What are you doing coming into Belfast?
Jeez.
And fortunately, we had a really good, really dear mate of mine, Paul Lyons, who's our tour manager, and he was an English guy, and he talked them through it. Okay, that's cool. Yep.
Wow.
Often on the road through Europe back then, we'd always have to give merchandise to border police, and because there was, if you come on the bus, it was pretty how you go on bus.
I've had to bribe with beer.
So anyway, so we get past this checkpoint, and then we get to this hotel called the Europa. This is in a 2-hour window of a grenade almost, just ending out.
What next?
So we get to this hotel, and it's called the Europa, and it's where everyone in the world used to stay there in bands because they'd play up the road at the Ulster Hall. And we get in there, and there's army there as well in the lobby, and we've got 50 to 100 pieces of equipment. Tip it all out, guys. And the whole lobby was our bags, our guitars, drums, just emptied out. And they went through every item. And all I could think was the checkpoint with the tank and this guy, if they would have found the grenade, I don't know what would have happened, but it wouldn't have been as nice as what it was at Heathrow Airport. So anyway, okay, no problem. Pack our bags, go to a hotel room. And it never took, this is the funniest thing, it never took long when we all had a hotel room. We'd all end up in someone's hotel room or the lobby to go to the pub within about 5 minutes. And I remember going to the pub in Ireland then and before sound check and having a real pint of Guinness.
Yeah.
How good's this?
Yeah.
We didn't even think about how whack the last few hours were. So how good's this? Oh, let's go to sound check now.
But I guess to be fair, you've lived and breathed a lifestyle of high excitement, high energy, high entertainment, high adventure. So if you're doing that on a daily basis, these crazy moments like that where someone has breathed fire and got a gun at stage almost becomes normal.
It was normal.
So you must be
going, 100% normal.
Well, we got a grenade one day and fire breathing the next.
It was 100% normal. I mean, I hear guys like, there's a classic Noel Gallagher thing, and he goes, oh, look, smoking a spliff was just like having a cup of tea. Yeah,
right.
It was fucking everywhere. No one cared. It was just what everyone did. And it's funny, no matter where I've been in the world, I've been in fucking so many cities in the world, I've never seen people in bands not be able to get fucking grass or hash in every single town they're in 5 minutes, within 5 minutes. That's what it was like. So it was just, you talk about dirt, and you see, that guy's doing this and that guy's doing that. That guy's passed out and that chick's doing it.
Just another day in the office.
Just another day in the office.
Just as you do. And
and it didn't mean that we were active participants or were these fucking mad people, but it was just like being in the circus. That was just what happened.
Yeah.
Wherever you went, that's what happened.
It becomes normal. Well, how do you go from that lifestyle? Because as you said, touring, you've done it for years. So if you do something every day, it usually takes about 2 to 3 months. I think the psychology happens to this. Where you can formulate somewhat habits, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen this so many times from a tour guiding perspective. I'll see someone traveling, and after about a week or two, they're like, I don't like this. I
Yeah.
want the comforts of my own home. Other people
Yeah.
going, oh, they can embrace this.
Yeah.
But what it does is after a period of time, it's like 2 to 3 months. People that want to live abroad or be
Yeah.
abroad or tour abroad,
Yeah.
2 to 3 months is that cracking point. Is this for me? Is this not for me? So band members
Yeah.
could do this. But it sounds
Yeah.
like you've thought,
Yeah.
I'm going to get through this. I'm going to persist through it.
I
I'm going to
think
overcome these travel challenges.
I absolutely like in those days, and again, you know, looking at these documentaries with these bands, it's drugs and alcohol keep people just numb enough to do it. And
Self-medication.
That was a lot of that.
Yep.
Lot of that. Now I'm 50. I work with a lot of people that are, you know, from Angry Anderson to Ross Wilson to anyone. Ango is 72, I think, this year.
Is Angry still angry?
Angry's awesome.
Yep.
He's the most beautiful man in the world. I
Good.
love him. I
Yep.
love him to death. But what I was going to say was, you don't find many people over 50 now that are touring doing music that actually drink. It's very strange to see. Most of these guys are sober.
Yep.
Or they're dead or they're crazy. And the ones that are still going, they clean their act up. So you look at your Motley Crues and you look at your Def Leppards and all that. There's no sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's all so
Well, I think
wholesome.
they meditate. They're
Yeah.
very conscious of their diet.
I have a nap
Mm.
every arvo I play. I can't not do that. And I have a nice strong coffee, and I won't eat till after the gig. You got to do that to sustain it. Do you know what I mean?
That's what a lot of people probably don't understand or appreciate, that commitment or that determination. If you want to keep touring and make that happen, you need to take care of self.
Yeah.
And I've also noticed, please correct me if I'm wrong, but when you look at tour schedules with bands that might be in their 20s, they might do it every day. But when I've seen bands that have been around the circuit for a little while and perhaps learnt from all these challenges, instead of doing the gig every day, there might be 2, 3, 4 days break.
Look, touring now is playing Friday, Saturdays.
Yep.
And go home for the week if you can. That's touring now, and it's a lot more sensible. In our day, if we looked at, we used to, our band was so brutal. We'd put all our tour dates on the back of our merchandise, and we'd look at other people's tour dates, and we go, fucking pussies, fucking pussies, 3 fucking days off. Then we did something like 46 gigs in a row once.
How do you sustain that?
Not well.
With the pint of Guinness.
Well, we had youth on our side.
Yep.
But you know, when you do that much touring, you are a robot and you love it. The minute the first song starts, it's all just feels great.
In the groove. Yeah.
Yeah. It's your ears go. I mean, it's like someone just goes bang on your ears. And we used to get to a point where we're playing so much where we go, okay, let's get the sound right in the first 2 or 3 songs, because after that, your ears just, I can't hear a thing. You're playing by feel. Like,
Sure.
you can hear, but it's like someone just punched you in the ears. And you're on a plane every day as well. So then the pressure's like pop. And I've got to say, I don't know how Dave ever, we might think it's hard for us playing instruments. He has to sing and be a front man through all that. I don't know how he did. He's one of the most bulletproof, toughest guys in that sense that I've ever met. I've worked with a lot of singers, and I've never met anyone that can just keep going. And I've got to give him that. He was always like that. I've seen and I've held Dave's head while he's spewed during songs, and he still does the gig. I've cut his head open with my guitar till he nearly passed out with blood loss, and he's still going.
How did you do that?
And he'd go up to me and go, how am I looking? Pretty fucked, mate. You got another song in you? I got one more. And he'd fall over and go to hospital, you know.
Talk about having commitment to the cause.
That's commitment.
Yeah.
That's if and I always used to say, if you want to be successful, not famous, fuck fame, who cares about that? If you want to be successful, it's like if you want to win a gold medal at the Olympics, you want to be prepared to go up at 4 o'clock in the morning for at least 12 to 16 years.
Do the work.
You know, that's
in.
a commitment.
Yep.
And don't have a life. And don't think you'll be at anyone's 21st or their weddings. Don't think you'll even be at your kids' birthday parties. That's hard. And so when you get a bit older and you've got kids, that started to really hit home. And, you know, you say when you finish such a crazy schedule, which could have been a year, you know, a tour could have gone for a year. You get home, wherever home is. We had no fucking idea what to do. The acclimatization was insane. I would always, and I vividly remember, I would always go down the beach, and it was usually Dixon Park. And
this is after spending years or months, many months on the tour.
I grabbed my surfboard because all my mates all still surf, you know. And often I hadn't had a surf for months because I hadn't seen the water. And I get on my board and I'm like, oh God, I can't paddle properly. And it'd take a while, then I'd get back into it, and I'd surf good, and I'd make myself really get into that. But to feel the sand of your home beaches between your toes, that really helped. You know, that really helped.
Recharge.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting that to learn about this stuff. I mean, I've always had knowledge behind it just from a tour guiding perspective, never from a performance perspective like this. But you've done all these tours for such a long time. How many tours have you done around the world, or how long? Because I believe you're no longer in the Screaming Jets, but you're a key songwriter and a founding member.
You know, as far as
how many tours have you? How many years have you spent on the road?
20 years, easy, maybe more, 25, maybe. Like always on the road. The funny thing with Screaming Jets, it's funny that you say that, like you're no longer in the Screaming Jets. It's to me, it's like. And I think, to be fair, Dave would be the same. I mean, Dave and I were incredibly close, and Paul and I were incredibly close. And at some point, I wanted to put the band on a shelf and just go, let's just put it away for a while. And as a band, to be fair, we used to talk about, that's what the Oils did. They just said, let's not piss on it. Let's put it away. Chisel did the same. The Hoodoo Gurus did the same. Let's put it away. Let's not piss on it. And by saying that, I mean, I'm not putting disrespect on people that want to keep doing it, but why are you still doing it? Let's.
You've achieved so much.
It's like
already.
A Cadillac. It's put in the garage for a while,
yep.
And then we can get the Cadillac out.
Sure.
And the Cadillac's worth more. But if you want to take all the parts off it and change the parts, it's not a Cadillac anymore.
It leaves the true authenticity, perhaps.
I think so. Yeah. And like we've moved through that. I've moved through that. I just I have my own jets now. Jets Play Jets with Richie and Danny Young, who's John Paul Young's son. You know, so and it's a killer band, and it's funny. We got just as many original Screaming Jets as the Screaming Jets. It's and the Herald once said that it's split into two factions, and I guess that's okay to say that, and that's okay. I wish Dave all the best. I do. We've entered this market now where we're playing heritage music, and he's playing the songs.
What is that? What is heritage music?
Well, heritage music. There's a heritage music thing. It's one of the biggest things in the world. It's if you went to America for instance, you'll see tours with. Well, the biggest one now is the Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Poison tour.
Sure.
That's a heritage rock tour.
Gotcha.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
But if you come down the line, you'll see like Tesla and Cinderella and all these bands you wouldn't know of that were around in the 80s and 90s, and they're still touring.
Yep.
And I think that's a cool thing. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm okay to play my Screaming Jets again now. I'm okay. I've tried to do it with Dave and Paul, and we just don't. I don't know. We just couldn't reach a compromise. I don't know. It doesn't matter anymore, and that's okay. But we can still do that. And it's funny, like, there's a lot of bands like that. I mean, if you look at a band like Foreigner or Journey, who massive bands in the States, they've got different singers. They've got one guy in the band, just one guy. And that's okay if you do it respect. There's no judgment on anyone. But then you've got bands like Aerosmith that will not do it without those 5 people.
Sure.
Or Cold Chisel that will not do it unless this is the band.
Yep.
Or Midnight Oil, this is the band. We don't all do it, we don't do it. So I fought with that a lot. I wanted to be that.
It makes total sense. Probably a similar band to yourself was Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
When they
Axl's band. Axl was Guns N' Roses.
And that was it. It was Axl Rose, and I think I watched them when they come to Newcastle, and I was like, great show, super impressed. But it was Axl Rose with I don't know anyone else.
It was only Axl.
Yeah,
that's a fact. I mean, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny when everyone just sort of buries the hatchet and just calms down, and then you got Slash and you got Duff. Hey man, this is making more sense.
Yeah. And the Cadillacs one together.
It's back together. Yeah.
Again. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't get Izzy back in, and he just goes. I don't know them well, but I know people that know them. Apparently, Izzy wrote like most of the songs. He's got like $100 million and just couldn't give a fuck. Good on him.
Doesn't need the tour life.
No, he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
He wants to ride motorbikes and walk his dogs.
But one thing that I find very interesting when it comes to travel, there's always highlights, right? Like if you're touring a place, tour guide, musician, doesn't matter. You're always looking forward to certain things. You're always perhaps not looking forward to certain moments. But there's these unexpected moments that can be often bad, which can be actually good. And sort of hear me out. I did a tour. I was traveling from Barcelona to the French Riviera. I had 40-odd people with me on a coach. Big storm come through, piss down rain, hectic winds, and it caused landslides, right? And I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is going to be hectic. Like, we got 2 nights in the French River. This is going to be a challenge. Flooding, right?
It's a challenge.
A challenge, to say the least. It was banked up traffic. We were hours behind. So I've got an itinerary schedule to things, or a gig, sort of that equivalent. I got to deliver something. We get there hours late. About 20 people had died, as we've seen on the news. Hundreds of people lost their homes. It was a disaster zone. We couldn't get access. There was complete flooding everywhere. Now, what happened is the French president at the time said, this is a disaster zone. So any hotels, guess what? If you got a bed, if you got a room, free of charge, these people who's without homes, they're going to stay at your place. Makes sense. Now, I've got prepaid passengers with paid a lot of money to come on tour with me, and I said this, and they to their credit, they thought, well, here's what it is. It's a disaster zone. It's not like I've got power over the French president here. We'll stay. So something that was potentially bad gave a fantastic opportunity for these people to come in and meet French people, locals. I'm just using that as an example of something very bad can often turn out. That was the most impactful people of their trips. What was the highlight? Was it the Eiffel Tower? Was it? No, it was meeting those French people at 2 a.m, getting to know them. But has there been anything like that in your travels, which you thought? I mean, it's interesting to hear about all these challenges about being on tour.
Yeah.
But there's some interesting stories that you can hold on to. Like it's how dirt was created.
I guess here's a bit of an analogy. I talked about Stevie Ray Vaughan before. He's one of my favorite guitar players of all time. He's a Texan blues player. He's been dead a long time. He got sober his last 18 months of his life. All right? And he's a master. But when you look at him, he's 10, 15 years of total fucked upness. He was devastating. And in rock and roll, I look back at the worst periods of our band with whatever it was. And those gigs were rock and roll. And they were the best gigs you could ever do. And the reason is, in rock and roll, it's a shame to say it, but it's supposed to be dangerous. You're supposed to go to a gig and not have a fucking clue what's going to happen. All right? And our gigs were like that. And I never had a clue what was going to happen on any night because the things were so bad. But we put it out in our show, and we let that be the catalyst, I guess, to let the demons out and purge the demons. And we put on great shows as a result.
So I guess it helped fuel positivity. It brought out energy that you perhaps didn't know that you had.
It did. And the other thing with our band was, I got to say, is what kept us through all these tough times, and that we had each other's back. We just did. We really did. We just had that loyalty to each other.
So I guess mateship or supporting one another through those challenges.
Yeah.
So I guess having a harmonious relationship with your fellow man or human or wife or partner or band member or roadie or manager or whoever, keeping that tight and cohesive and positive can continue that on.
It's hard to keep it positive, but we all had one goal, to be the biggest band in the world.
The mission.
That was our only goal. We had a mission.
You all believed in the mission.
Yeah, so that didn't matter what anyone would do.
Yep.
You'd still front up and be there. I had funny stories. Like, I remember, I won't name names, but I remember sharing hotel rooms with certain band members, and we'd have 3 or 4 days off, and I'd go to bed and I'd wake up the next day and, he's still not here. He's been out for 4 days. But at 10 o'clock on the Wednesday, when it was lobby call, he'd be the first one in the lobby. Yeah, he hadn't been home for 4 days, but he was
Turned
the
up.
first one in the lobby. That was sort of our work ethic. It was as strange as that sounds. Yeah.
So after experiencing this tremendous lifestyle that you've had or achieved, how do you go from that to decide to stay in Newcastle? It
Yeah.
sounds like after experiencing a lot of the world, what keeps you in Newcastle? What keeps you here?
Well, I got family here. You know, my family's all here. My friends are here. A lot of lifelong friends here. I've still got one of the major things behind maybe not our success, but maybe. As I said, we went to school at Morris Brothers together, and my cousin's the year under me, my brother's a year above me at school, and we've got there's probably a dozen of our mates, and we call ourselves the Mongrels, and we've been mates since the 80s and beyond.
What is it called? The
Mongrels.
Mongrels.
Yeah, so we've all
So-
gone off and done massive things around the world,
Okay.
and we're still best mates. We all got together a couple of Saturdays ago for one of our 50th, and it was just like we were 15, you know, getting drunk when we're at school. But I remember touring around the world, and those guys would pop up at a gig because they were all touring and doing things around the world in other things. But they come in and it was family. It was always family, family, family. So what keeps me in Newcastle is that's you can't get past that. I've also got 2 sons and a daughter from 25 to 10, and from a boys' perspective, my boys have played, sport for Merewether, Carlton. They're engrossed in the rugby culture, the beach culture, and that greater culture is the second generation from my culture, because I'm still very close with all the guys my age.
Sure.
And they're the next generation, and it's really beautiful. Like my oldest son just got back from Mexico and Banff on the same trip as you do.
Yeah.
Minus 20 to 40 degrees.
Banff up in
Canada,
BC.
Yeah.
Alberta.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he, I catch up with my mates, and our sons are over there together, and they've got some stories from travel. I'm waiting to unpack a few more stories from them.
Because you'd know.
Yeah, but I did warn them about going to Mexico, and they had a couple of moments there, which I'm still waiting for my son to have a laugh over. But yeah.
So it's really the lifestyle and for family. So you got good, solid family network and friends.
Yeah.
And you can gig because you're still touring and gigging, but
Yeah.
I guess on that weekend sort of roster.
Yeah, and I can have a normal life during the week, and I can go anywhere from the airport and do a gig and come back or drive or whatever. But at the end of the day, I just don't know a better place in the world than this place. I just don't. I've always.
What makes it so special?
I could be the tourist, side of it and go, hey, we've got the vineyards, we've got the lake, we've got the.
For you, but because
the
you're a
ocean.
local. Yeah. What do you get out of it?
The beach is just overwhelmingly great to me. I've got so much heritage there and so much peace and so much. It's my go-to zone. It's my haven, But it's the people that come with that as well that are still there too. There's nothing better than going to the beach and running into 20 people that you know really well, and it's all peace and it's cool, and we just man, check out these lifts today. We're still talking the same stuff we were 35, 40 years ago. That's a cool thing.
You really get a good balance of quality of life.
Well, where else? You've traveled. Where else in the world, particularly America, you won't see that. People don't live in the town they grew up in. They aren't with their lifelong friends and family. They're just not. Newcastle's a very rare place as far as that goes in my experience, where you find a lot of that.
I do 100% agree. You do get the big cities in Australia, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, where there's a lot of interest for international or domestic people to travel there for a particular reason. Newcastle's got a little bit of that. And a lot of people from Newcastle, I'm guilty of this, you're guilty of this. Many people leave the bubble, experience the rest of the world, other parts of Australia, and go, ooh, this is a gem.
The first time I come back from a big overseas tour, my dad picked me up from Sydney Airport, and I vividly remember saying, Dad, we should put a fence around Australia. It needs to be protected. There's nowhere like it in the world.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember saying that very early. And we could digress and say, look what's happened to us since then. I don't know.
Depends on your perspective. But
It depends on your perspective.
that's what keeps me here. I'm blessed with having a British passport.
Yeah.
And I've lived abroad
Nice.
for about 4 years in total.
Yeah.
I was that close because I had plans to move to Berlin, and I was in London for a long time.
Yeah.
Incredible cities and still close to my heart in many different ways. But every time I return to Australia, it's like, shit, it's far away, and it's hot and this and that and the other. But if I do a big pros and cons list, which I've done, there's about that many in the cons, that many in the pros, and the standard of living here and the quality of life.
100%. 100%.
It's up there. I think it's top 3 in the world.
Ben,
has been the last 10 years.
Here's the other thing that keeps me here that I greatly appreciate and respect as I get older is to belong to a community is a privilege, and it's rare. And to be part of a community where you can be actively engaged, and I won't use the word influential because I don't want to sound self-righteous. I can't influence anyone, but I'll give to it. I'll give to the community.
You've got knowledge and experience, which you can.
I'll be part of my community.
Sure.
I'll help anyone because I've been helped, and I think that's a tremendous thing that Novocastrians have, and we see that. We see it if we chant the Newcastle thing at the football or whatever.
Oh,
we will stick together.
Yeah.
I love that. I couldn't be. I'm a proud Novocastrian. Obviously, I am. And when I said, before you had to leave and there was tall poppies, that's not dissing Newcastle. That's just going. You got to get out of the bubble.
Yeah.
You've got to get out of the bubble, and I think all kids should. And my oldest kids have really got the travel bug, and that's great. Everyone should get out of here and experience the world. You'll come back. But you've got to see how good it is.
100% agree. Just got a few things I want to talk about, and we start to wrap it up. Could you perhaps give one great takeaway to people listening or watching, a travel tip? Because some people's planning a month-long holiday or something. How do you get the most value, or how do you best prepare?
I have lived in a bag so much. My biggest tip is this. Throw half to fucking 3/4 of your shit in your bag out. You fucking don't need it.
Yeah, pack light.
Take a couple of t-shirts, a pair of jeans, 2 pairs of socks, and find a fucking laundromat or find a sink and wash them, right? But the other things they need is, your personal life. Just whatever you really, really need every day, just have them, because wherever you go, you take what is just those things that your fundamentals. You're home.
Yep.
You got all your stuff. I travel light. I'm the lightest traveler you've ever seen.
What's the weight of your suitcase or your backpack?
I won't even take a suitcase. I take a small bag.
Good on you. Because I'm the same. All my travellers, when I usually check them in at the airport as a group, they're all like so worried about the weight limit because they've jam-packed bloody everything in there. And they go, what have you packed? You're the tour guide. You got paperwork. You got everything. And that weighs like 8 to 10 kilos every time. And they got 20. Now, how the hell do you do that? So I just turn my undies inside out.
If I've got a weight issue and I've got to take guitars or something, that's all my weight there.
Yeah.
I've even been travelled so light I've worn the clothes I'm wearing and put a spare t-shirt in my guitar case.
So there's some good travel tactics.
That's my
travel hacks.
That's my travel tip. And the other thing too is just whatever medication. Like I'd always take like a Nasonex or an asthma spray or a gastro stop or just things that you are going to need. Nurofen.
Hard to find items that if you specifically you got to go to a pharmacy, and the pharmacy might be on the other end of town. It might be challenging to get to. So those little finer things that's specific to your health.
And here's this might influence what people think of my manliness in a hard rocking band, but I always have a little sewing kit. I love those little sewing kits you get from hotels. I'm not afraid to sew a button on or put a stitch in time on a shirt when I'm away.
Well,
always carry a little sewing kit.
There you go.
And some Band-Aids and some Betadine.
Band-Aids? Well, when you're playing guitar and you're splitting the singer's head open. Excuse me. I'm just going to go to the side stage and get my Band-Aid out.
No, that was a hospital job, that one. Yeah.
Like to also play, because I was a bit of a joke, 2 lies, 1 truth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
All right. So I'll say 3 things. You got to pick the truth. Okay. So it is specific to the Screaming Jets.
Yeah.
Let's see your knowledge on this one. So the Screaming Jets, the first Australian rock band on a major label to yell profanity out to the Prime Minister. All right, 2 more to go. So that's A. B, the first Australian rock band on a major label to bite the head off a chicken on stage with Alice Cooper. Or C, the first Australian rock band on a label to put out a song with the word cunt in the title.
So the middle one wouldn't be truthful. There was no biting the heads off chickens, but yeah, I remember the ramifications of both the others very well. We actually got given in the Kerrang magazine was the heavy metal Bible in the UK, and they gave us the 5-star award one year, and all their awards that they give out, like Rolling Stone magazine does, for the most credibility for having a song called Fat Rich Cunts. Yeah. But that was a double-edged sword.
That's a gutsy move. You drop the C-bomb now on a podcast. It's offensive, and apologise for everyone offended.
Yeah, well, I was quoting the song.
Days,
I was just simply quoting the song. And that was on our first album. And
album you did that?
Yeah. The double-edged sword was we had better on all these kids going, yeah, isn't this great? And the parents go, listen, this is fantastic. Let's buy the album. And then they'd go, oh my God, listen to this song. It's on the album, you know. And I tell you a little story about that. We had a lot of famous people came in and sang that chant at Rhinoceros Studios, which was in Excess's studio, and famous studio. And I remember, I actually think I did flag that, you know what, can we just censor that word when it comes, like, beep, like, can we just do that? No. It was no way. Okay, cool. But, yeah, that was a bold move.
It certainly was.
It was about Russians and people like, we have Clive Palmer and all that now. It was about those guys. And
the Fat Cats.
And the working class can go, yeah, I can dig that. I'll let that fly because I can dig that. And that's what it was about. It's about them, those sorts of guys.
Which really resonated with the hard rocking band that is of the Screaming Jets.
Yeah. Oils had another way of being political.
Oh, boy. Well, Grant, I really do appreciate your time coming down here. Proud Novocastrian. Mate, there is so much to your story, which is incredible. I really do appreciate all your travel tips and some of your stories. That there seems like there's so much to Grant that once was that is not now.
I got 2 more travel tips, maybe 3.
Bring them on.
Don't get on planes drunk or hungover. Don't ever fucking miss a flight. Don't ever get there late at an airport. I never do that. We did it once. It's a nightmare on Christmas Eve. And my other one is when it's the pilot's discretion whether the airplane's going to take off and fly, be worried. Because I've been on 2 of them. We nearly crashed.
Wow.
So, yeah, there you go.
Wow. What happened? What just crashed?
Bad weather. And it was the pilot's discretion whether they were going to fly or not. And, one of them. And I actually have a laugh at this pilot. I know him well. He's a good guy. And like a flight that should take half an hour took about 2.5 hours. And I was praying to God the whole time. Oh, the plane's going like this. And massive storm. And I said, man, what happened? He goes, man, we didn't know where we were for 2 hours. That was scary. And then there's another one where we've been on a few flights that have been pretty frightening. There was another one when the front tire blew out too, and they literally jammed the handbrake on before it lifted off the ground. That was pretty frightening. And I said to the pilot, what would have happened? And he said, it would have been bad. We would have crash landed at Mascot, and it would have been pretty hairy going with no landing gear at the front. That was a good one.
But it's all about travel, touring, and adventure. Which
and
is
another
what I'm all about.
Another thing is too, when you charter planes, don't let the pilot feel like he's part of the band and hang with the band because they get pretty loose after a week or two.
He's
and
got a job to do.
They're flying your plane the next day.
Man, unbelievable. Grant, really appreciate everything. I appreciate all the value added that you've done on this podcast.
I hope it was entertaining.
It certainly was for me. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure indeed. Yeah. That's funny.